Thank you, Faustine. Thanks, everybody, for being here this morning. So, a brief introduction. I do have some slides that might show up at some stage, yeah. Right, so a word about who we are. So, IGF is this audit body within the Ministry of Finance, and our job is to advise the ministers about current issues. And they asked us about a year ago to start working on NFTs and commercial tokens. The idea being that after MiCA, there were some areas that could be worked on and further enhanced. So maybe the slides are going to show up at some stage, not really sure. Anyhow, so 3 of us have actually worked on this report, Yvan, myself, and Valentin. And also we've interviewed about 200 people, many of them in the room, and I want to extend our thanks for their contribution for our work. That's the first point. The second point is the report is public, so we have a website. You'll probably see it, or you can go to LinkedIn, and if you look up IGF or if you look up my name, you will find a link that will allow you to download the report. And last but not least, what's in the report is our views and the views of IGF. It's in no ways either the view of the ministry and, of course, neither the view of France or the French government. It's personal and independent work, which the objective being to initiate reflections and some strategic thinking looking forward. The reason why the ministers asked for this is precisely because when a first law that was enacted was the Loi Pacte, which gave birth to what is now in Europe called the CAS, Crypto Asset Service Providers. So it was forward thinking on the part of the French authorities to invent a new regulatory system that was taken over in the European context. And the idea here was kind of to do the same thing, was to try to think ahead about what were the challenges that were going to show up after the entry into force of MiCA this spring. And one of the key aspects that was identified was, of course, commercial tokens and NFTs. And that's the reason why we were asked to write a report on this, leveraging on the strengths of the French ecosystem and trying to identify, as Faustine had said, what were the regulatory improvements that could be put in place in order to try to encourage and boost the sector. So what we looked at is basically 2 categories of tokens. One, you have utility tokens as they're defined in MiCA, which, as you probably know, are actually divided in 2 categories. You've got one category of commercial tokens, which are the commercial tokens that will give access to a future service. These tokens are mostly used for fundraising purposes, of course, by startups, and therefore they must publish a white paper. Their trading is within the future CASP framework to a fairly large extent. So these are more regulated like financial ICO types of products. And then on the other hand, you have commercial tokens that are going to give access to an existing service. So it's these tokens that we focused on, and we also aggregated to these tokens NFTs. The reason being that we didn't feel that there was that much of a difference in between an NFT that's going to give you access to a game or a metaverse and, for instance, the in-game currency. So we thought from a regulatory perspective, it was a better idea not really to focus on the fungibility aspect of the token, but rather whether or not this token gave access to a service. And we also covered in this art-style tokens. They don't really give access to a service, of course, because it's just the ownership of the token that the users want and from which they derive the utility. But we nevertheless thought that they should be part of this family of what we called commercial tokens. So for the regulatory regime, I'll just make 5 points. 2 of them are more on the, let's say, domestic side, and then you have more European aspects that will be thrashed out in the future as MiCA has to evolve. So on the French side, we have 2 ideas. One, there is a specific tax regime for crypto assets in France that is extended to these commercial tokens. We don't think it's a very good idea. I mean, if the token gives access to a good or a service, our view is that it should be taxed as a good as a good or as a service, particularly from income tax perspective, and this is already the case in VAT. And then the second aspect, which we believe is very important, is when you look at MiCA, a token, it either has a prospectus, because it's a security, so it falls under securities law, or it's a Title II MiCA token, so it will publish a white paper. And what we saw is that when you're looking at commercial tokens, the problem is they don't have any obligation vis-a-vis the people who buy them to explain exactly what they're going to do. So our view was that it was a good idea that within the token, in the medium realm and probably in a European context, token producers or the emitters of token will just put in a link to their commercial conditions explaining the users what the token will do. So this is, of course, law today. However, there's one specificity of token which seems very important, which is the fact, of course, that they can be resold on the market. And consumer protection law today doesn't cover that scenario at all or in very limited terms. So typically the problem you have is, well, you issue a token. This token will, say, give access to a game or to a metaverse, but you will also be a member of a club, like luxury brands do that. They will issue the token and say, tell the people who buy the token, if you buy this token, you can be in this discussion group or a member of this forum. However, a lot of these luxury brands will tell you, yeah, but we give this for customers. If they resell the token, we're not really interested in having the person who buys the token being a member of that club. So I think we believe that if these tokens are to develop, these issues have to be specifically referenced in the token so that people know what they're buying, which is a really very strong and general principle of consumer protection. Then if we move it in the more MiCA context, our view is NFTs, which are kind of weirdly carved out of MiCA as we speak, must be brought into the fold of the regulation. We don't really see a reason why they shouldn't be. And something also has to be done with peer-to-peer platforms. They don't necessarily have to be crypto asset service providers as they're defined in MiCA, but we do believe that there should be an ad hoc regulatory regime that would cover these platforms. And then we have two major lines of thinking for the future. One is the fight against market abuse and insider trading, particularly on platforms. Our view is that insider trading and market abuse provisions of MiCA should be extended to all trading on platforms of tokens, no matter which type of tokens. And in addition to that, and we realize it's a bit controversial, but we would like to apply the principle that people who commercialize these commercial tokens or manufacture these tokens should not be allowed to be players in the secondary markets for their tokens, okay? The principle, I will sum it up in a phrase I often use, Picasso did not buy his own work of art. So if you're making a commercial token, you can't be going in the secondary market trying to buy your tokens to prop up the price of the tokens as you're about to issue new tokens. I mean, this is, of course, completely frowned upon in the financial world, and we don't really see a reason why these types of behavior should keep on going on. It will, if this is not put a stop to, obviously if these tokens develop, it will considerably undermine the trust of the public in these tokens. So something has to be done about this in our view. And finally, there's a, of course, very complex issue around AML and terrorism financing. Also, if these tokens are to develop, this is an issue where something has to be done. You can't keep on having these chain analysis reports that say, you know, crime is down, but I mean, it still remains very high, and there are a lot of things that are going on that are not going to be acceptable in the long run if there is massive adoption of these tokens. The idea we have, and there are many different aspects to this, and it's a very technical issue, but the major point I want to make today is we do believe, and we will have discussions today on digital identity, that there's a key technical solution around this, which is to embed in unhosted wallets an identity token, and this identity token will confirm to whoever is dealing with that unhosted wallet, whether it be a token originator, whether it be a P2P platform, or a CASP in the MiCA vocabulary and Absen in France. It will give them the certainty, A, that they're dealing with an individual and not a bot, which for commercial reasons is of course important, but it will also give them the comfort that this person has used a service, that this service has identified them, that this service is referenced and it's well known and regulated, and that therefore they can deal with that unhosted wallet in confidence and within the framework of future AML rules. So it's a way it doesn't mean that you have to do away with anonymous transactions, or it doesn't mean, just like in the banking system, you don't give your identity to when you do a transaction. That's not what we're talking about here. It's more the fact that, you can't have like unhosted wallets, numbered accounts as they used to exist in the banking world, without ever having a way for someone, if necessary and within a proper framework, to find out who actually is behind that transaction. In the long run, this will not be a sustainable practice. So in a nutshell, that's the major conclusions. You will find everything on the web. You can download the report. There's an executive summary in English. The report is about maybe 60 pages, but it has a summary also at the beginning. And then you have these technical appendices that you can dive into if you feel like it, which are a bit tougher and much longer. Thank you very much for your attention. I think our